we've got this beautiful triangle, right? What goes at the top? T. What goes here? F. T. C. And the C stands for? And the T stands for? And the D? And the S? Diamond Standards Training. See? It fits. Works. All right, now let's go over direction. All right, direction, we talked about 6 parts. 6 parts. What's number 1? Stakeholder needs. What's number 2? Mission. What's number 3? Vision. Which one is more constant? Mission or vision? Vision. Which one changes seasonally? Vision. Vision. After vision comes? Goals. And after goals comes? Can governing values be compromised if you get into a tight spot? No. That's why they're governing values. If you can compromise them, you don't need governing values because you just go with the flow, right? But you need to know what will we not compromise, and let's not wait till we get to a tight spot to determine what we'll compromise and what we won't compromise. Because when you get into a tight spot, you're more willing to compromise a lot of things. Isn't that right? How many of you have ever known somebody to get into some credit card trouble? Because when they get into a tight spot, they decide, well, go ahead, and for years, they paid that price. Is that right? Okay, so you got to know what your governing values are. So let's get into strategy here. Strategy. I'm going to give you 6 parts of this one as well. Number 1, the purpose of strategies. The purpose of strategies. And by the way, shortly, we're going to give you some handouts so you don't have to take all these notes. Is that good? The only reason they're delayed is because I delayed them. Okay? So I'm going to give you the handouts. But I want to talk about, so just don't write now, just listen. The purpose of strategies. I want to talk about that. Somebody said, well, of course we know, because we don't know how we're going to get this done. Yeah, but it's a little more deep than that. And if you can get your mind around why you have to stop, get your team together and break this down, it'll help you to be disciplined to do it instead of just starting to run. And then we're going to talk about the purpose of written strategies. We want to talk about preparing to develop a written strategy. And then you're saying, well, what's all the preparation about? You'd be surprised how many people do not prepare, and they get it. I've done it myself. You get into a strategic planning meeting, and it will not go well. I don't care how many hours you spend, it's not going to be accomplished. In fact, probably within 2 months, nobody will even fool with it anymore because you didn't prepare correctly to do it. And how many times have you been in a meeting and we developed some big strategy, you and your team, but 3 or 4 months later, you're like, well, we didn't even talk about that. What happened to that strategy? It's because there's a lack of preparation for it. You weren't ready for the strategy, and so when you got in there, yeah, you mapped out a lot of stuff, but you really can't execute it because you weren't ready for it. So then we'll talk about the technique of mind mapping, just a technique, but it is helpful. And then I want to talk about the key strategy elements, and this is so important. You need to know, if you're going to develop a strategy, what are the key or the core strategy elements? What are they? And what sequence should you approach them in so that you come out with what you want? I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk and end with the right ingredients. What are we really looking for so that we can get our team in motion? So, let me just mention something here while we're waiting for the notes with something that's not on my notes, but as we move forward, they're going to be. Now remember how this is all broken down. Level 1 of leadership discipleship is an overview of everything. So what we did with direction, that's just an overview of direction. Level 2, we're going to take just direction and break it down and become skilled as leaders at setting that direction, casting the vision to our teams, larger teams, how to reinforce that, how to keep everybody on track, okay? So we're going to break that down. That's level 2. Level 3, we're going to do the same thing with strategy. Level 4, we're going to do the same thing with teamwork. And then level 5, we're going to do the same thing with the character of leader, okay? So, but something that I don't have in my notes, it wasn't in Officers Academy. I want to talk about structure. I have come to realize, in fact, this is what I'm doing with this whole leadership approach is I'm tweaking it to accommodate for and compensate for the weaknesses in our systems and our approach to leadership that I just see here at the Rock, not just in the Anaheim congregation, but I mean across the board. And one of them is structure. And let me talk for a few moments while we're waiting on these handouts. Let me talk to you for a few moments about what I perceive to be possibly the greatest miss of leaders here. And I'm not just talking about leaders, and on some team 5 levels down. I'm talking about all the way up to the very top leaders that miss it. And I think it's true in organizations secularly too. And that's this. When you get a vision, when you get an assignment, like, okay, I've got an assignment. And this assignment is going to require this, a team at some point that's going to be pursuing this whole vision. Most people, because of their own experience, approach it at a very small level. They approach it in a way that they've always done it. For example, let's say you're a service leader for kids ministry. Let me tell you what a service leader is, at least my understanding of it. Pastor Ron can correct me over here if I'm wrong. But a service leader is the leader of one of our services. How many services in kids ministry do we have, Ron? Every Sunday? 9. About 9 services. Is that just in the morning? Okay, so just in the morning, there are 9 services. That means we need 9 service leaders. Is that correct? Okay. So if I'm a service leader, then I'm thinking about these kids that come into this service, and of course it's not always the same kids because parents will switch services, new parents will come in and bring their kids and such. Sometimes the kids that we had last week or the week before, the week before, the week before are not here. And so I'm thinking as a service leader, well, man, I want to reach a lot of kids here. We want to get ready. So say we have a vision. Let me step up to age group director. Age group director is over service leaders for a particular age group. What's the second age group after nursery? Okay, so the age group director would oversee what? Okay, so the one above the nursery in 2s and 3s, what's the age group for that? 4 and 5. Okay, so here's an age group director over 4 and 5-year-olds. Say you're the age group director, and the Lord puts a vision on your heart, just a piece of the vision, but you're believing God that every Sunday there are going to be 200 4 and 5-year-olds. All right, now let me just ask you a question. In a 5-mile radius around the church, 5 miles this way, that way, that way, that way, there may be 2,000. I don't know. And you're saying, man, we want to reach 200. There may be 5,000. We don't know. But you have a vision to reach 200 of them. Okay, now, so what do? Well, you look around and say, who are the leaders that's involved with this? And so you get them all into a room and you say, hey guys, 200. Let's go. And you're already messed up. You know why? Because you've got a vision of 200. And so you come in to the team that's already there and try to strap that vision on a team that cannot handle that vision. And so now you're going to burn them out, overload them, and eventually they're going to start, quitting to get away from you. And you don't know why, because you got a vision you believe is from the Lord. See, you presumed that what you had right there is all you have. Let me show you what I mean. If you take your vision, and before you ever start trying to strap it on somebody, you stop and say, hold on, Lord, I'm asking you for some wisdom here as to how to approach this. Did you know Jesus prayed all night before he chose the 12? Why all night? Why all night? You think, well, he's the Son of God. He doesn't get tired. You think he gets tired? You think he really wanted to pray all night in his flesh? Why did he do that? It's a big deal. Because who I choose right at the beginning is who's going to make this successful at the end. Are you listening to me? Who I choose right here at the beginning is who I'm choosing that's going to make it successful at the end. And isn't that true with the exception of Judas? Judas, that's a tragic story with Judas. But aside from him losing his salvation, which I think he did because Jesus said it would have been better for him if he had not even been born. Okay? But aside from that, set that aside because that's tragic. Okay? Isn't it encouraging that even Jesus lost one? So that you don't feel like a big loser as a leader if all your leaders don't stick with you for the long term. Isn't that right? Okay. Now, but notice he prayed all night long to get his initial team together, because if you don't pick the right team up front, who's going to finish this thing off at the end? Right. Most people, they just start gathering up my hair. Like it doesn't matter who we pick in here. He prayed all night long. Jesus, who's already pretty wise and smart, right? Filled with the Holy Spirit. He could have just said, Lord, I pray, give me some wisdom, and everything. Okay, you. No, he didn't even trust himself. He prayed all night long to make sure we're going to start off with the right people on this team. This is so important. This is so important. And we're not just talking about people. We're talking about the people that are going to lead, be right there next to you and lead. And he chose 12. Why 12? Okay, 12 tribes of Israel. Dozen donuts. Why 12? Well, we don't really know. Why not 10? Why not 15? Why 12? We don't really know. God knows. God knows how this thing was going to play out, and so he chose 12. Okay? We don't know exactly. Now, people can, theorize, or they can, just, speculate that, one person can only, really lead about, okay, and that's all good and everything, but why 12 instead of 11 or 13? We don't know. But here's the point. He prayed all night long to make sure that he did the right thing. And this is where people miss it. They just grab people like it doesn't even matter. And they just start going about it, burn their team out, because not only may they not have enough people, but they don't have the right people. Because the Lord knows who has the capacities, the grace, the giftings to play what role. I believe that the Lord not only knows who should be on our team, but what seats they should sit in, what we should assign to them. So, if I'm looking for 200 kids, I got to map this thing out. Before I just get into a room and start strategizing, I got to map this thing out in my head. Okay, so How many rooms? Now let's not be limited to our current structure because we're not all of us are familiar with that. But let's just say we're starting a new church and you're the kids pastor now and you've got a vision, and the vision is, among other things, we want to get kids born again and disciple them and all that too. But just say the vision includes that we want to get 200 kids. We're just starting 200 kids. Okay, so we got to break it down like, okay, how many age groups is that? We want 200 like from babies to 6th grade all together in the same room? No, we don't want that. Okay, how do we break it down? See, if you just start throwing people in there and trying to work on a strategy and you don't know how it breaks down, that's going to be a mess. Okay, you got to know, how does it break down? What class, how many rooms do we have to work with? How do we break it down? Now, once we break it down, how many services can we have? Like if we have 2 services as a church and we have 4 age groups between, just starting off between nursery and 6th grade, well, that's 8 services. Got it? If we have 2 services as a church and we have 4 age groups, that's 8 services. Is that right? There's 1 for the nursery and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've got 8 services. Now, I need at least 8 people there. But if those 8 leaders, each over a service, are the only people I have, well, who is going to help me to give them the supplies, give them curriculum, crafts? You see what I'm saying? Who's going to do that? Who's going to greet the parents? Who's going to check the kids in? So I can't just start with 8 leaders in a classroom. That's not going to work because all these people are going to come. It's going to be an organizational mess. I got to step back up higher than that and say, look, I need some leaders over to help me over this whole thing. The administration, the check-in, the organization of it. Who's overseeing these service leaders? And so that's why we have age group directors. And so we may have somebody that's over administration. You as the leader can't just jump in the room with a bunch of people and start strategizing when you don't know what those top level positions are going to be. You have to, in your mind, build those top level positions and then invite those people to come. And make sure that they're willing to play a role to do this. So, for example, say you've got those 8 positions or those 8 services, but you're thinking, man, but I need 1 person just to oversee, the 9 o'clock service. Because I can't be everywhere, and I know I'm going to have parents talking to me. I need somebody to oversee 9 o'clock. I need somebody to oversee 11:30. So there's 2 big leaders right there, right? Over 4 leaders each. But then we've got other leaders under them. Somebody's doing check-in, registration, right? Somebody is doing maybe hall monitors to make sure kids aren't being lost or whatever. You've got all these other roles. But you've got these 2 big leaders, 9 o'clock and 11:30. And maybe you say, I need another leader, though. I need somebody that is supporting all of us administratively. Right? Parents are calling in, they've got messages coming. Who's organizing all that while we're doing the leading, right? So, see, if you don't stop and pray and map out in your mind who all these leaders are, you're going to get in there and just think, whoever shows up, that's good. And that's not good. Jesus prayed all night. All night. So let me ask you a question. Now you've got a leader over each of the 2 services, 9 and 11. And each of them have 4 leaders under them. Plus you've got an overall maybe administrative leader. And maybe you might have under that administrative overarching administrative leader, you have an administrative assistant for each of the services, right? So now we're up to, how many leaders are we up to now? We started off with 8. We got 2 more, that's 10, right? And now we've got an administrative person, maybe 2 assistants, so that's 13. Isn't that right? See, what are you doing as a leader? You're building a structure that doesn't overburden people. And you hadn't even, you got it built in your mind. You hadn't even invited anybody yet. What are you doing? You're doing what Jesus did. You're praying to make sure that you get the right people. You're praying. Now, if you're a service leader now, one of the 8, are you going to do everything yourself? Are you going to be in there by yourself? You're not going to be in there by yourself. Depending on what age you're dealing with. If you're dealing with people in the nursery, and say out of 200 divisions, we're going to prepare for 200 kids. Well, I need to start getting this thing ready for what? At least, how many babies would that be, Ron? 200 overall kids?
Let's say
30 babies. 30 babies. You're going to get in there and hold 30 babies and change 30 babies. So now, 30 babies and just divide that up, so it's 15 per service. You got 15 babies in there with you. And I'm not even talking about your helpers yet. Okay, so how many people you need in there with 15 babies? What's the ratio for nursery, Ron? 4 to 1. 4 to 1. So for 15 babies, how many people do you need? So you need 4 people. 4 people. Okay? So, can you see, when you start mapping this out, just one of the 8 services, you need 4 people in there. And the leader. And why do you say and the leader? Because look, as a leader of that, you can't be one of the ones that are there, because who's going to talk to the parents that are coming in saying, oh, now my baby's, hadn't been feeling good or whatever, who's going to be out there dealing with that? Is that right? See? So that's just one. So you start multiplying that 8 by 3 or 4 each, and we're talking about a lot of people here. Is that true? See, so you need to know who are my top tier of people that are going to get it with me, that are going to understand, hey, we got some recruiting to do. I mean, let's not wait till all these babies and kids show up to be overwhelmed, scattered, and then we're going to start recruiting people. Let me tell you, it's the worst time to recruit people. Here's what a lot of people do. Hey, man, can you help us? What's going on? Man, we got so many babies. There's poop everywhere. The parents are upset with us. The babies are screaming. And honestly, my whole team is stressed out. You want to come help me? What are you going to say? No. In my spirit, I'm not sensitive, right? I feel called anywhere else. Right? Right? Listen, that's the worst.